Hello there, and welcome back to Fundamentals of Programming. This is Lesson 6, and today we get to delve into code. I've written a simple application that we will look at, dissect the little pieces about it, and then we will turn around and rewrite it, because doing is always better than not doing. So let's go ahead and delve right in. This particular application only has 2 lines of code, and even though it's very simple, this could be considered an application. This is what we typically call a Hello World application. Usually when programmers are learning a new language, the first application that they write is the Hello World application. This is just customary. You don't have to do it, but it's custom. So this is going to display text that says Hello World inside of a dialog box, and we will talk about the different pieces of this code that make that happen. So let's start with line 1. It begins with 2 slashes followed by some text, and you can tell from the color coding that the text is all the same grayish color. This is what's called a comment. Comments are documentation or annotations that we can add to our code. They're actually not part of the program itself. In fact, comments are completely ignored by the JavaScript engine. If you're writing in some other language, if you're writing a compiled language or some interpreted language, comments will be ignored. It's a way that we can add documentation to our code, especially if we've written some code that's not necessarily clear. We can use comments to add some clarity to that code. Comments aren't always necessary, especially whenever we have something this simple, but I wanted to demonstrate what a comment is. So if we read this text, it says, display a message in a dialog window. And since this comment appears directly above a line of code, we can assume that line 2 is going to display a message in a dialog window. But you don't have to put a comment on its own line. You can actually put it on the same line that you have some code. Anything after the slash is considered a comment. So we can add a bunch of gibberish here, and that will be perfectly fine because this is all considered part of the comment. This is what's called an inline comment. It starts with a slash. But if we go to the next line and we start typing something, you can see that the color is going to be different. This is where color coding is very helpful because it's displaying comments in one color, and since this text is in another color, it's safe to assume that this is no longer part of the comment. So the JavaScript engine will actually try to execute this, and we will get an error because it doesn't know what this particular code is. But if we want a comment to span multiple lines, we can use what's called a multi-line comment. That begins, instead of a slash, it begins with a slash asterisk, and then it ends with an asterisk slash. So anything in between these 2 delimiters, which is what these are called, these are comment delimiters, anything inside of the slash asterisk and the asterisk slash is going to be considered part of the comment. So we could break this up into multiple lines if we wanted to, and it would all be considered part of the comment because that's what a multi-line comment is. And after the comment is finished with this ending delimiter, we can actually write some more code. We can see that the code editor is not only coloring the text that we are writing according to the code, but we can see that it's also prompting us with something. So if we finish off LND, then we have essentially the same code that we have on line 2, except without all of the comment. But we typically don't want to format our code like this because this has a direct impact on the readability of our code. We want our code to be as readable as possible because whenever we do have to go back and look at our code, we want to be able to look at it, find what's going on, and then fix whatever problem that we are fixing or adding some feature to. We don't want to have to decipher the code and think, okay, why did I format the code like this? So if you're going to use a multi-line comment, do so to where it kind of makes sense so that it's not all jumbled up with the rest of your code. But I'm going to get rid of this, and we will add back in the inline comment that we had before. So display message in dialog window. Okay, so let's look at line 2. It begins with the word alert, and it is colored in blue, which is different than anything else that we've seen so far. And that's kind of a clue as to this is something special. Well, alert is actually a function. A function does something. in not only JavaScript but other programming language. Whenever you execute a function, it has a specific thing that it does. You can use the term execute, or you can also use the term call. So you can execute a function or you can call a function. Either term means the same thing. So in the case of alert, it's going to pop up a dialog window within the browser. So this is how we are going to display a message within the browser. It's going to use an alert window, and then it's going to display whatever message that we specify. Now let's actually write some code. Just alert. Notice that the color coding is painting this as white. It's not blue yet. Well, we have just used the name of the function, but we haven't done anything with that function. So in order to execute or call a function, we have to use a set of parentheses. We have to open and close parentheses. This will call the function alert. So if we were going to load this code within the browser right now, it will first show a dialog box that says hello world, and then it will show a dialog box that is empty. Well, let's go ahead and run this within a browser. I already have an HTML page set up that references this code file that I've been modifying. So I will just run that within the browser. We can see an alert box comes up. It has the text hello world inside of it. And we can see that this says JavaScript alert. This isn't anything that we can change. Chrome is doing this for the user's benefit so that whenever we pop up a dialog box using the alert function, it's telling them that this has come up because of JavaScript. But whenever we click the OK button, it's going to pop up another alert window, and it has the text undefined. Now earlier I said that this should be empty, and this is actually going to differ between different browsers. Chrome is going to show undefined. Undefined is a special value in JavaScript that means that it's not defined. But if we run this in Internet Explorer, we should see an alert box that is empty. So the first one says hello world. The second one is empty. So different browsers will sometimes behave differently depending upon what the code is. So why did one box display a message while the other box didn't? Well, it's because of what we passed to the function. Some functions require some information in order to perform whatever job it is that they are supposed to do. The alert function is one of those functions. It displays a message, but you have to supply the message that you want it to display. So we do what's called passing data to that function in order for it to work properly. In line 2, we pass some text, hello world, and you can see that this text begins with a double quote and ends with a double quote. But you don't have to worry about that right now. We will talk about that in the next lesson. Just know that we are telling the alert function, hey, we want to execute you, and we want you to do what it is that you do with this text that we are giving you. So we are passing the text hello world to you so that you can display it within an alert box. And that's what happens when line 2 executes. But when line 4 executes, we haven't passed anything to alert. So then it's up to the browser to determine what its behavior is. And that's why we saw Chrome display undefined, and we saw Internet Explorer display just an empty box. And the reason why we saw that is because alert isn't actually part of the JavaScript language. It's actually supplied by the browser, and it's supplied by a part of the browser that isn't controlled by standards. So you might notice different behavior from different browsers. And unfortunately, there's no magic algorithm or anything that's going to tell you how a browser is going to behave, especially with something like this call to alert. It's just something that you have to either know from experience, or by reading some material, or by watching this particular lesson. The last thing I want to talk about is what lines 2 and 4 are called, although I just deleted line 4. What line 2 is called. This is called a statement, and you can think of it very much like a statement in the English language. Just think about writing a blog post or a report or a book or something, just something that is a lot of sentences. Well, that whatever it is that you just wrote has a lot of statements. It's one statement after another. And you have different types of statements. You have one that is just a normal sentence. You might have one that's a question, one that's an exclamation. There are different types of statements within the English language that you can use to write a blog post. Well, it's the same thing with writing a program. A program is one statement after another, and you have a variety of statements that you can use inside of your program. In the case of line 2, this is what could be called a call statement. We are calling a function called alert, passing it data, and that's it. The statement ends with a semicolon, and that tells the JavaScript engine that this is one complete statement. This is the statement, go on to the next statement. We don't have another statement, but if we were to add one, then line 3 would be considered a statement. Even though we aren't passing anything to the alert function, this is still a call statement. So this is basically how we write programs, just one statement after another. We might organize it in a different way, just as whatever piece of text that we are writing might be organized with paragraphs or lists or something else. We would organize our code in different ways, however it makes sense to us. Well, before we go, let's rewrite our little application here. We're just going to replicate lines 1 and 2. We're not going to worry about the call to alert without passing any information, but we will redo lines 1 and 2. We won't redo the HTML, but let's go ahead and look at that so that you can see what it is. You don't have to know HTML for this course, but it will come in handy later on down the road. If you're not familiar, it's just a markup language that we use to mark up our content. Some of that markup can determine how it is displayed within the browser, but more often than not, we try to stay away from that because that is what CSS, or cascading style sheets, are for. So if you're not familiar, HTML is made up of a bunch of what are called tags. The tag is anything that begins with an angle bracket and ends with an angle bracket. So this is a head tag, but it also has a closing head tag, and that head tag begins with a slash. So we have an opening head tag and a closing head tag. These two tags together form what's called an element. So this is a head element. The head element contains a meta element. Notice that there's no closing tag for meta, but it does self-close with that slash. The head element also contains a title element as well. Inside of the body element is typically where all of our content goes, and we can see that that's where I have put the script element. This is going to reference the script file that we have been working with, so it's going to bring that into the browser. So let's go back to our JavaScript code and let's recreate the code that we had before. Let's first do the comment very easily. So display message in dialog window, and then we want to write the code that displays the message in the dialog window. So we will call the alert function, and then we will pass in some text data. Now do be sure that you use the double quotes. If you do not use the double quotes and you try to pass just text like this, this is going to result in an error. But if you surround hello world with double quotes, then you will be fine. You can also use single quotes, but you have to match the quotes. If you begin hello world with a single quote, you have to end it with a single quote as well. So you could do that as well. I'm not going to go into the reasons why that's the case. Just know that you have to use quotes. I prefer double quotes, but you can use single quotes if you want. So we have rewritten the code that we had originally deleted. Let's go ahead and run this within the browser just to make sure that everything is working again. So we will double click, run it, and there we have hello world. So there you go. That is the anatomy of a very simple application. We will begin to look at some deeper things as far as coding is concerned. In the next lesson, we will talk about different types of data that we can work with, especially the fundamental types of data. So have a good one. I will see you next time.